Because that's the one thing that we can all.
Right, so I'm going to get started here. Welcome to this webinar, Getting Ahead, how it's being used in a literacy program. And I'm going to introduce to you Jane Tuer, and she's going to take it from here and share what they're doing in her organization. Welcome, Jane.
Thanks, Ruth. Welcome, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're from and where you're at. I'm really excited to see some of the names on here, people that are doing things. I was excited to see about the Employment Resource Network. We're very fascinated in Ontario about the Employment Resource Networks and have been reading up on them. Let me just give you a little bit of background on this. First off, myself, I've been in the adult literacy field for 30 years. I was a child prodigy. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And what happened was I've been trying to get Getting Ahead running within my region in Ontario, in southwestern Ontario. We're about an hour west of Toronto, for anybody that knows that city. And I was having problems. Other regions have been running Getting Ahead programs quite successfully. And finally, we had a section called the Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation, which unfortunately under the current government has been defunded, so they no longer exist as of April the 1st. But before that, they were providing supports for us to become do more research into how to get literacy and employment services here involved more so within the workplace. And from that end, I applied to say, can we try the new Getting Ahead in the Workplace model? I think that we could use this very well here because in the early 2000s, like around 2012, when we had the economic downturn, I live in Waterloo region, which is a very heavy manufacturing region. And we, of course, lost some of our major manufacturers. And that was a devastating process. But we've had manufacturing build up since then. And the manufacturers, our unemployment rates are really low, and manufacturers are having a problem finding frontline staff or entry-level staff. So we saw this disconnect because, of course, in everything when it comes to stats, it's always unemployment rates don't include people that are on social assistance. And in Ontario, we call that Ontario Works. That's what our welfare is called, is Ontario Works, or the Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP. And this is a disconnect. These folks were not being hired. They're not being included in any of these registers, so people think that there's nobody here and that is available to be employed. And I did my research based on that, saying to the Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation that we need to have something in place that helps Ontario Works clients and ODSP clients move into these workplaces, but be supported, because the research was also showing that they were having a lot of fires, but mostly quits. And we understand that if we've worked in bridges and Getting Ahead ourselves, we know what this has been like. So with that said, I'm just going to explain a little bit. We also have within Ontario the literacy and basic skills programs, which are run by community-based programs, school boards, and colleges, and are funded under the Ministry of Training, Colleges, and Universities. So we like to have everything under different auspices that just make it more confusing, I think. And we also have employment services that we work with closely, and those folks are obviously getting people into employment. And locally, we also have within all of the regions planning boards that also do all the labor market information and the work with employers. So now that you have those kind of things, let me just give you a little bit about the. Okay, let me see if I can get my screen to work again. There we go. The project overview. We were exploring bridges out of poverty in the Waterloo region. So they wanted to know, with the workplace stability training that Ruth has developed that's fabulous in the book that's done, we wanted to know if workplaces would be interested in having that involved, and if they would be interested in possibly doing something like Getting Ahead in the workplace. So what the government wanted us to do was to test the effectiveness of Getting Ahead in the workplace with Ontario Works and ODSP clients first. So that's what we did. And we came from that standpoint. So we were doing those two different field tests. They were just short and quick, but luckily I've been trained in bridges out of poverty facilitating, and also in facilitating the getting ahead. So I knew that I could get the other training in fast and do it. So that worked out well for us in that capacity. The workforce planning boards do an employer one survey, which is a survey that they do with as many employers as they possibly can. We usually have around 500 employers respond to it in our region, and it lets us know a lot of different data. And this is what we based this whole thing on, was in our 2017 results, so that was what we used in 2018. It showed the manufacturing sector that 72% of all separations were due to quits, and 20% due to dismissals. And then in 2018, the quits went down to 53% and dismissals rose to 24%. But it was still a number of people. 75% of manufacturers also indicated that they had hard to fill positions. And they said the top reason they gave was there wasn't enough applicants. So we thought this was a perfect thing to show why there is applicants. They're just not making that connection to individuals that live in daily instability. So the Workforce Planning Board worked on this project with us, and they went out and consulted with 35 employers in the region that are manufacturers. And they did interviews with these ones, and two major topics were talked about was the recruitment challenges they face and the difficulty in retaining workers. And overall, employers felt wages, high industry competition, and misconceptions about manufacturing were reasons for the high quits and low job applicants. Employers often recommended external solutions to address these issues, such as a greater involvement in the education of high school students and adjustment of youth expectations when entering the workforce. And we know from our standpoint that that's not the real issue out there. When they were asked the top reason people were quitting, the top responses were that workers wanted more pay and better benefits. Pay was always the first one on their list, wanted to work fewer hours or more desirable shifts, and wanted less labor-intensive work. In other words, just an easier job. And they also indicated, employers said that the current low unemployment rates had created the shortage of workers. And that's what employers were finding, that they felt that these employees that were leaving them were leaving to go to an easier job or find better payment for a job. There we go. Now, the employee perspective was quite different. They did focus groups with individuals that had been either employed less than 1 year or longer tenured employees, so people that had been employed with manufacturers for over 5 years, and then unemployed people that had manufacturing experience. Well, for our project, we also looked at individuals that were just on Ontario Works and the Disability Support Program to look at what their needs were. So we tried to do it from all angles. They were actually they got into manufacturers that let them talk to their employees, and they had 22 participants within all of this, with a diversity of age, work experience, job positions, and departments, so it was a nice mix. The number one reasons that the employees said that they stayed with an employer was appreciation and opportunity to advance. Those were their two major issues. Money was there, but it wasn't their top two. Wages were discussed, but they said that that wasn't their main focus. They really wanted a positive work environment, advancement, and employee appreciation was just as important to them as money. Now, we do have to say we do have a fairly decent minimum wage. It's not decent when we look at a living wage, but in Ontario, the minimum wage is $14 an hour, and that's good. Unfortunately, change of government, we had been promised an increase in 2019 to $15 an hour, and the current government stopped that from happening. So, quits in manufacturing, they were finding out that these were the reasons behind it, that there's a number of different reasons, and the employees increasingly view shift flexibility as a main attraction in a company. And too many manufacturers are sticking to those old rules of here's our shifts, and these are the shifts we will keep forever. And I was just looking, yeah, Katie's just saying they're at $7.25 minimum wage. We're almost double that. So it really, wages probably don't make as big of an effect here, but the cost of living is obviously a lot higher in Ontario than most parts of the United States. Not New York City, we've made that comment numerous times, but I also spent a lot of time in South Carolina, and I know my cost of living there is so much less than here. The average apartment rent in our region, just for a bachelor, is, I believe it was at $1,200 a month. So if that gives you some idea of what people are living at. Most importantly, straight shifts opposed to a continental or alternating shifts. Those rotating shifts were also a thing that people didn't want. They didn't care if they wanted to do all of these, if they wanted to stick to a same shift. They didn't care if it got rotated around. They didn't want to be rotated. It was their big deal. And employers weren't realizing that. Oh, that's crazy that it's $7.25 is your minimum wage and $1,200 a month is the average for the apartments. Wow, Katie, that's rough. You have it rougher there definitely than us. They just wanted people to be able to accommodate shifts, maybe flex them a little bit more, make them a little bit where, if somebody starts a half an hour later, that might work better into bus schedules, or it might work better into people being able to get somebody into their children to school or into childcare. So they were looking at, it's just about trying to look at more flexibility instead of saying to the old way of doing things that they've been doing since the 1960s. Another thing was this grunt work. And employers didn't really like this one, but employees really, every employee in all the different places pointed out grunt jobs were a big deal. And these grunt jobs usually tend to be physically laborious, often mentally demanding, repetitive, tedious, and don't offer competitive wages in comparison with the work. And almost every manufacturing facility has grunt work. The people felt that the problem was if you were good in that job, you kind of got stuck in it and you had no chance for advancement. And so they were saying it would be important to look at this as that, allowing people that do a good job in one of these grunt jobs to move forward, and that everybody knows that they could even move out of those jobs or rotate those jobs. They were okay with that. It was just that they were afraid of those ones, and that's why they would quit, because they felt stuck. The top priority for workers also was that desire for respect in the workplace. And I have to say that's a theme that's gone on even with talking to individuals who hadn't been employed. They just said having the opportunity and ability to bring forward ideas and concerns or having input into job processes. Many employees felt disconnected, which contributes quickly to disinterest and lack of loyalty. They want to be respected and that they can contribute to the greater good of the company if they have an opportunity to be consulted. 50% of new hires in this results were found that they were unaware of any potential advancement or training opportunities, and thus more likely to leave. So this is why employees say, this is the thing. Wages and raises came in fourth, but it was really about feeling like being a part of that company, feeling safe in that environment. So instead of saying that they had recommendations to the employers, the Workforce Planning Board said, we're going to tell them there's considerations to make. To look at their pay scales, most of the employers had said that they had looked at their pay scales, but it was 5 years ago, and they thought they were up to date. And we said, it's about providing those and posting those pay scales so people know that they can advance. A lot of employees were saying that they were starting jobs when they saw something was going at $20 an hour for the job, they were signing up for that one instead of signing up for the $16 or $17 an hour job, even though they had no idea that the $20 an hour job was probably going to stay at that rate forever, while the 16 and 17 would move up past that rate after a certain length of time. So it was really important to talk about that and to have wage assessments as they go on. If they knew that that was coming, that would have made a difference. So it was just, once again, being good with communication within. And then the grunt jobs, identifying those jobs and review the job descriptions and make some more employee check-ins about, how they're doing, how they're feeling about that job. Do they need to be moved out of it and rotate it? That respect piece. Develop and implement a process for employee input. They didn't want anything big. They were just going, can we have a suggestion box that you actually read? Because I know there's places that have them that never look at them. Staff meetings and consultations were another one. Even they said if there could be walkabouts done by plant managers and CEOs, just so they felt there was a tie-in to each other and that they weren't just ivory tower thinkers. Work hours, do that shift review. Offer more part-time work, because we're finding that, if somebody has a decent part-time job, they want to keep it, but they know they also need to have another one. And as we know, a lot of people that live in daily instability are working in more than one job. So you have to offer those options. And nowadays, especially with the youth, we're looking at a lot of youth do want more flexibility. They want to have more variety in their lives. So this is a really important one. A lot of people, employers even mentioned that workers constantly are asking for 3 or 4 day work weeks. And they're going, well, you know, this isn't a big deal. And then they don't even pay attention to the fact that all of the other workers that are on time and are being there all the time and working full time are taking up the slack because they're not creating these part-time positions. So it's been an issue that way. Supervision, once again, they wanted to talk about this, is that was a big deal, and I heard this too from people that had worked in many different jobs, was that the supervisors in many of these manufacturing places aren't trained to be supervisors. They're just moved up by seniority and ability on the job. And they were saying you need to really give them more training on that HR aspect and make some balance for discipline and reward. They have to be consistent. If you have policies, everybody has to follow the policies, not just the people you don't like. It has to be everybody. And they were saying that happens. We complain about that all the time in funding, that it's like, you know, based on who they like or not like. So with that said, we talked about the workplace stability. We provided this review of this process to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. They've been very supportive of this whole process. And I am actually giving this workshop next month in Stratford, Ontario, which is another big manufacturing area where they're having a huge problem about getting people employed, because once again, they're not getting people from Ontario Works or in daily instability. They're looking at people that are on those unemployment rolls, and there's nobody left there that's going to work into employment. So this is the work that Ruth has done, is that really it's been very important for us when we went out and talked to employers to talk about this pain that instability creates with employees and businesses. So if you haven't taken the workplace stability training, I'm putting the pump in now for it, because it really does take that bridges into another aspect that really helped us to talk to employers directly and get them to understand, because the pain of transportation, they think about, maybe they might think about the employee end, but usually they don't even see that that's where the pain can come, that if people can't get to the bus lines or the bus lines don't run to those regions. That happens in one of our cities here, is that where everything is located, there's no bus lines. So they don't even think about that. And then they're realizing, oh, maybe the tardiness and the absenteeism is because people can't actually get here. So it was interesting for employers to talk to employers that way. It was a big help. What we did was to really also look at trying to convince people within the welfare system here that run it, that there are employees available, but that Ontario Works, once you get somebody off Ontario Works, they're coming back on. Because if you look at this, 2015, 16, 17, we've recovered from the economic downturn, and yet our Ontario Works caseloads kept increasing over those times. In 2016, 37% of the caseload had been on assistance for more than 2 years, and the average time on assistance was 15.5 months. According to the study, Welfare Realities from Rhetoric to Reform, the first 2 years of a person's time on welfare are critical. If they stayed longer than this time, they are likely to be long-term clients of social assistance. If someone remains poor for 3 years or more, they're far less likely to escape poverty, as we know. So in 2011, there was a study done locally on the recidivism in Ontario Works in the region of Waterloo, which showed that individuals who left Ontario Works in Waterloo region, 68.6% of them returned in less than 9 months. This study also found that the highest return rate happened within the first 5 months. And this is interesting to note that sole support parents also had the lowest return rates at 45%. They were bound and bent. The people that probably have the most barriers are bound and bent in maintaining their jobs. Interestingly enough, there was a project called the SANE Project in 2005 that found that 20 to 50% of welfare leavers returned to reapply for Ontario Works or social assistance within a 12-month period. So Waterloo region was a good one for us to start in, with us having a higher rate than most of the province. Then I did the thing that Ruth also created on this, the cost of turnover. which is once again a stability model, a workplace stability model that really made the Ontario Chamber of Commerce jump up and do. The links to the studies, I just saw that Joe asked about that. I can send out this list to Ruth to make sure that gets out to you, the list of the studies we used for that, so you can get them, okay? The cost of turnover is fascinating. And I went through and did this in our local region. She has if you get the workplace stability book, you can go through it. I did what it would minimally cost an employer here just for a turnover rate. And I based it on the average pay scale for these jobs to do all of these different things within Ontario and the mandatory employment related costs we have. And coming up with that, this would be very conservative, is that the total cost of the turnover of one employee within an Ontario workplace, one employee, is at a minimum $3,237.20, which is absolutely crazy. So 10 employees, you've jumped that to $32,372, right? So according to employer run results from 2017, manufacturing alone in our regions had 879 quits. These are just the people that actually responded to the employer one survey, and 400 dismissals. So that's 1,279 turnovers in jobs. So when you do the math on that, just at a minimum, it probably cost them more than this. It was $4,140,378.80. Just so over $4 million in 2017, it cost just the 107 manufacturers in our region, and we have many more than that. So that's why it was a really easy sell for us to, yeah, ouch, no kidding, Joe. It's crazy. When I figured this out, I was going, oh my gosh, Ruth, that is nuts, because it was just such a shocker to figure it out. And like I said, I chose the most conservative I could. And so I can hardly wait to start presenting this in Stratford and have it go even further with employers, because the Ontario Chamber of Commerce certainly has jumped on board to this. So Carol went out from the Workforce Planning Board. She had her staff go out and discuss with folks about the Bridges Out of Poverty and the workplace stability models. And the whole point was it was full-time positions seemed to be the dominant type of employment in the industry. 94% of employees represented in the survey were full-time, and 90% of the hires in 2018 are expected to be full-time. So once again, we were talking about full-time employees when we went out and did this, and they still talked about the high competition for workers. So they wanted to find out what employers were doing. What are they doing to try to do this outreach? What are they doing? They're not using the free assistance that we provide within the province. They're not using these employment service models that we have that can provide that. They have these stereotypes and misconceptions about hiring somebody from social assistance. And this is where we were saying, but we need to give you more information. You have misconceptions. And they are open to new approaches because they have to be. They're at a critical point, and they have to be. And I think that this is happening across both our countries right now, is that unemployment is dropping and there's a lack of individuals, and you can only bring so many people into your country to fill the jobs. And especially, I know that you have more issues with that in the States than we do, but we have enough problems with trying to bring in refugees and individuals that can take these jobs and then speak the language. We've been finding employers are going, yeah, we'll just hire everybody. If they can't speak English, we'll figure it out, because they become this desperate. So they actually did say that they were interested in moving forward with this, but unfortunately, like I said, the next step of our project wasn't funded. But we're going to explain how we've kind of tried to come around this one. So I did focus groups with individuals that were on social assistance, and I had 7 focus groups, 58 participants with 15 in our Getting Ahead in the Workplace program that we also ran. So I had 73 respondents. And most of the important supports that they indicated they need to get a job was, number one, transportation. They said that was our biggest issue. How do I get to work and how do I get home from work, especially with shifts? Resume development. something as simple as resume development that we all are going, oh my gosh, we have programs that can do this. People just aren't aware of what's available. Startup funds, they were concerned about covering the cost of clothes and tools, and yet that is covered by social assistance here. So it was interesting they didn't even know we're sports. They also said reducing their debt load, all the things that we know that the employment resource networks in the states that have run in 5 different states are doing. So I was able to start selling that point out there about the employment resource networks because I think it sounds fantastic and could work here. So we talked to them about the Getting Ahead in the Workplace program and how that works. And we said, would you be interested in something like that? Because right now, most of the employment folks are hearing people come in the door and say, oh, you know, I don't have time for training. I don't have time for this. I just need to get a job. That's what I'm here for. But one client said, wait, you're going to help me figure out why keeping a job and staying in a job has been hard for me and difficult. That'd be a smart idea to do. And sure enough, after we did some of these focus groups, I had a number of people sign up for the Getting Ahead in the Workplace program. They felt that it would definitely be helpful. 2 groups all unanimously said that they wanted to take this kind of training. So we actually had the 9 individuals start up from these programs that I gone out and talked to. And then I had 9 others that referred through caseworkers and the employment resource centers that they run within our social assistance departments. We actually had to start a waiting list, obviously. We had 14 individuals on a waiting list right now for the Getting Ahead program for the next time that we actually run it. So we already have enough people to run again. Interesting enough, with the focus groups, 5 out of 7 groups listed manufacturing as a job that they wouldn't mind getting. So because a lot of manufacturers said, oh, a lot of people don't know where to work here. And when we asked what you'd liked, once again, respect was one of the top 3, friendly environment, and more training, orientation, and professional development became the most. The things they disliked, everybody agreed on this one, they disliked bad bosses. From cranky to ignorant to negative was their comments. And also the bad attitude of co-workers was also thrown in when it becomes that poisonous workplace. Harassment or forms of harassment were named as the second one, and lack of respect for skills, knowledge, and opinions. So it's all about respect. Most indicated that they needed support for transportation to get to a job, and they also all agreed that they needed more education. That would be important if they ever wanted to move up in a job. They said that what made them want to go to work every day was the need for money, the need to survive, to have a decent pay to go to work every day. But they also agreed that having a good, friendly work environment made them want to go to work every day. So it was an interesting take because we thought number 1 would be money, and it really was not. Employees want to be told honestly that they're doing a good job. That's what they asked for. They said, if people could just don't give us that, you know, good job every day. Tell us when we're doing a good job. And they just really wanted that respect. Employees want benefits. And I have to say that's something that's different here in Ontario. We obviously have free health care, but we have to pay for drugs. And we have to pay for, you know, dentistry. So people were saying the drugs is a big problem because when they go off on social assistance, they don't have a free drug card anymore. And that was the one thing that they were saying, some of those bonuses put into place as an incentive would be good. So employers have been looking at that. We have one employer here, it's a manufacturer from this result that sat there and said, well, we can start to provide at least payment for their drugs right up front if we can't get them onto the big full health care plan. But at least we know that they can all go to doctors and hospitals for free here, and they're safe with that. So our next step, as I said, I had 17 individuals registered for the Getting Ahead in the Workplace program, and I know they recommend, Phil recommends in his books that it should be up to 12, and I was hoping from experience, knowing how individuals that live in daily instability have those moments where they just can't make it. I was hoping to have 12 people in the end. And I actually ended up having people stay. They were all on social assistance. They had to be at what I called a high level 2 in our Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum Framework, or essential skills, which is based on the International Adult Literacy Survey levels. So a high level 2 would do best, but we had at least one level 1 person, but I was able to support them within this. Once again, we had 17. I thought one would never show, and she did not. 16 showed on a regular basis until one discovered she wasn't suffering from a really bad flu. She was she was pregnant and had really bad morning sickness, and she still wanted to come, but we said it's okay. We'll run this again. So everybody stayed for all of the classes. We ran this differently than most getting aheads. We ran it for 5 weeks, 3 times per week at 3 hours per session, just because of the fact that folks on this group were, their main focus was to get employed, and they only wanted a short period of time. As a matter of fact, most of them had indicated they would prefer 3 weeks, 5 days a week. And I said, well, that's just not going to work if they're going to do any of this investigations. I can't do that. So we came down to that agreement, that working it a little bit differently from the regular Getting Ahead program that way. I'm assuming most of you run it in a longer period of time than that. So in the end, I was fascinated with this program. I have to say, I sat back after running. I've run obviously a lot of different facilitating programs with literacy and adult learners for 30 years, and I have never seen results like this. I was saying this to Phil. I was going, the light bulbs going on, and people at the end coming up to me and going, this is my life. How did you guys come up with this? Like, this is exactly what I'm experiencing. And I was just fascinated by this. So I have been pushing this with all of my fellow programs out there across the province, saying, you got to run this. This is amazing. Top 3 things that they found that they learned in this program. You can see where they increased all their resources and gained about the number of people that gained employment. I can add 2 more to that list now. I was just talking to 2 of them this week, and they both have full-time employment that they're very happy with. So I'm quite happy about that. We had 8 of them go on to further education and training, which was fabulous because they were ready to move forward and increase their skills and do better. They felt that it increased their confidence. They had a better outlook on life. They said that they believe in themselves again, how to look at aspects of their lives, at what tools from programs applies to it to better my life relationships. They found that it was just okay to be themselves, and that it was worth the investment in this time. So we can use this to other people because, as they said, they're investing in themselves now. And at the end, I'm sure this, for those of you that have run Getting Ahead, you know that these are the kind of results you get. In the end, they were saying things like, this is how they felt. And these were just so warming to all of us because it's like, finally, a program that actually has everybody happy at the end, and everybody was. I have to give an example. We had one gentleman, Tommy, who had been in one of our adult literacy programs and had been one of these guys who was very quiet, never spoke up. He'd been in the group forever. He had actually been in this program upgrading for 4 years. And so he was doing things, he was doing what we call milestones, which is our test to show that you've increased your skills. But he was 2 weeks into this program, and I had a call from his instructor saying, what have you done to Tommy? Because Tommy suddenly is now coming in and talking to me and telling me what he wants to do and how he controls his life and, you know, where he wants to go. Tommy was always being pulled out of class by his parents to support his younger siblings, and he never said anything, and suddenly he went and talked to his parents and said, I need to go to this class. It's important for me to move forward. And they were fine with that once he explained why he couldn't watch his siblings all the time. But he'd never spoken up to them before even. He hadn't said his own thoughts. And right now, Tommy completed all of his upgrading. He registered for the chef training program right away and took the chef training program, and he's now a sous chef at a nice restaurant in our downtown area, which is just, he hadn't done anything basically in 4 years, and within less than a year, he has made his goals all come true. And so it really does work. Even if you're not in a workplace, this program helps to people to move forward from that. I also had another individual who didn't want to be there. I knew he was just there for the money at the first, and I thought, let's see how this works. And for the first week, he had his arms crossed. He passed every time it was his turn to read, and he did not have a reading issue, so that was interesting. While all the literacy folks read, which was right outside of our comfort zone, because we're going, we don't force people to read out loud in literacy. And I was going, maybe we should, because nobody had any problem with it. And this young man, all of a sudden, the second week, just didn't pass. He started to read out loud. And then we were talking about committees that are out there that he could sit on, that people sit on. And I said, yes, there's a lot of people within Ontario Works that sit on this committee that informs Ontario Works what services are needed and what isn't working for them. And he came up to me, and he would have to apply through our regional government. He came up to me and said, I want to do this. I want to apply and I want to attend. And he has been on that committee ever since. And he is one of the most outspoken people on that committee with really good input. And he has made some major changes for individuals on that program just because of this. I've been quite fascinated by those responses. Our next step, we wanted to run 3 field tests. That was supposed to be phase 2. This obviously didn't happen because we wanted to also create a position of support worker, which would be our lead into that employment resource network. I have to get people to get their heads around that here. And, you know, having the maximum of 15 in each group, because I would not want more, but 12 would of course be best. And then have those 2 groups focused on employment at a manufacturer. We have a manufacturer that was ready to run this. So we're still hoping to be able to do that. It's just that we don't have any of the supports or monies to run those programs. And we're already I'm going to do the workplace stability bridges out of poverty training to employers. I'm just doing that off the side of my desk, as we all do, because I'm pretty sure the side of our desks are bigger than most of our desks out here. And I know that's the way for you folks as well. So no funding. We're still going to run the Getting Ahead Workplace program. As I said, I have aligned it to our Ontario Adult Literacy Curriculum Framework here with milestones so that individuals can use their regular government funding to run the program. And I'm suggesting for us that it be co-facilitated at the beginning with a literacy provider who can talk about further education and training, and an employment service provider who can help people with these resumes and cover letters and interview questions that they have about employment, because that seems to have had a really good effect on the results of our program. We're still going to offer the training, obviously, to local employers, and I am out promoting this Getting Ahead in the Workplace to all programs across the province and our literacy programs. I'm out there giving workshops to them on what our results have been, and we've done a roadshow with showcases through the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. So hopefully we're going to get some bites from that from employers. We certainly have a lot of Ontario Works departments interested in continuing with that. And with that said, that's the end of the presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you so much, Jane. That was really fascinating to listen to what you've put in place, how you put it in place, and some of the results you're seeing in your next steps. So if you have questions, please put those in the chat for Jane to answer.
Yeah. Joe, for this project, we did have the money to give $25 for them every time they came to a session, and we covered transportation, obviously, and childcare, because we have that built in. Our programs will be able to provide childcare and transportation. They're going to have trouble coming up with the stipends because of the fact that until they get supports, and I've said to them all, you have to work on that. Ontario Works, I've talked to Ontario Works about the stipends, and people, of course, question it. And I've got a lucky thing here is that we also have this program by the government called Youth Job Connect, where they pay high-risk youth to come in. They pay them to be in their classes and training to go into employment. So I said, where's the difference? If we're paying those folks minimum wage, why should we not be at least paying our folks coming into this, because they're doing work? So there's some Ontario Works departments that have said that, but they're autonomous within each region. So I've said that that's a really important thing, and I've certainly pushed for it, but some of our programs already have individuals within their program that are interested in taking this, and they're saying, we don't care, we'll make sure we get to it. So it depends on the relationship, I think, but to attract new individuals, I'm totally with you on that. It does need to be the stipend.
And Joe, we have employers actually using this in the workplace, and they're getting paid their hourly wage while they take the Getting Ahead. And so in that case, the stipend is not needed. What other questions? It's always interesting. The data was interesting to me to see that wages were not the number one piece.
Yeah, it was really about, everybody kept saying respect. I couldn't stop hearing that word. And I thought, you know what, that's true. If I don't feel respected in my job, I probably wouldn't.
Mhm.
Goodwill Industry does a great job. For training with job-related needs, Industries does a great job. Yes, I have to agree with you, Katie. They do. It's Goodwill here certainly has employment services in some of the Goodwill sites, um, and it's such a great spot for individuals to go to develop some of their skills. Interesting enough, recommendations for getting started with employers. Um, we started with employers that we know have been open to education, whether it be, providing a GED class offsite or onsite, or providing other types of training, especially employers that aren't unionized. I'm going to say it right now. The non-unionized employers were very interested because they don't want to become unionized, so they really provide a lot more training to their employees. I hate to say this out loud, but in Ontario, we have pretty darn good employment laws, so it's not like employees don't get a lot of supports from that. But we also have employers that really want to provide training, so they were much more open. So I have one called I make jokes about this. If you've ever been in Waterloo Region, we have a company called KEI, and it used to be called Kuntz Electroplating. And I know why they changed it to KEI, because everybody mispronounced the first word. And you can laugh if you got that joke. And if not, I'm not explaining it out loud. Anyways, they were very open to this because they really want to keep their employees and they really don't want to unionize. So they've been very open to us, and we're in talks with them to run this program on site. We also have a number of chicken processing places. I don't know why. We seem to have a lot of sausage and chicken. Maybe it's because we're a German-based area, but we've had a few of them interested in running this kind of program on site too, because once again, not a unionized environment. The unionized environment has been a little bit, yeah, it sounds delicious. Yes, it is. Pillar sausage, Schneider's. We have the Wiener lady on our side. Um, we also run an Oktoberfest here. We actually, before the Second World War, we were called Little Berlin in Kitchener because it's a high German population. But it does have a lot of those kind of manufacturers, and they did that. Bratwurst, there you go, Joe. So a lot of places, a lot of manufacturers, I would assume in your region also are not unionized. Those are the places I would suggest starting with, because once again, they do want to keep their employees and they don't want them unionizing. So to keep your employees, you want to give them, I find that those work sites seem to have a lot more respect for their employees because there isn't that disconnect between them. And maybe that's something unique to Ontario, but I would hope that that is a similar thing, because I don't think our countries are that different in too many ways, except for healthcare. Maybe that's it.
Finding out the pain of the company usually is very beneficial, and using
Yeah.
that turnover. The Society of Human Resource Management says that the average cost of turnover for an entry-level employee is $4,200 and some odd change.
Yeah.
And Jane calculated hers at 3,200 very conservatively. So if you can do some of that turnover calculations with your businesses, it's many times very eye-opening.
Well, they need your book, Ruth. That's what I'm sorry, I'm now selling her book, but it's such a good book. It's not a hard read. I work in literacy. I do love reading, but it's an easy read, and it's got such good, it's to the point. You do such a good job with making it to the point, and how to talk to employers, because that was the thing, is we could go out and talk to employers and tell them, do you realize that this is available to you, that these things are out there, and that here's the situation you're in? And absolutely, the pain was a big one. And those numbers, when I did that with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, they were, basically they were catching flies with their mouth, because and that was, I said, super conservative, as we know, and they were pretty impressed. Interest in the healthcare field. Yes, interesting. We do have other employers outside of manufacturing, but we have not approached them because this was based on the manufacturing process, and that has been the biggest need within our regions for employment. We are having problems within our healthcare system for personal support workers and early childhood educators right now, because within our school systems, we have moved kindergarten down to we have a junior kindergarten and a senior kindergarten, and they also have a lot of ECEs now within the junior kindergarten. So there's been a big need for that. But it's the school boards then I'm trying to deal with, and I'm trying to deal with hospital situations then, unfortunately. But I would assume the same thing. If they're having a high turnover rate, they're having the same situation, and they might be able to. I don't know how your systems work, but within our region, there's like health units that help to provide supports to all of the dental programs and the regular healthcare programs that they can promote there. So I know that public health here has been very big on bridges and moving that kind of work forward. So I'm working with them, but I'm not directly working with those employers as of yet.
Yeah. Caitlin, last month I did a workplace stability workshop with a health group. And they again they were supporting, their business was supporting individuals with disabilities, very interested in it because of that turnover. So I'd be happy to talk to you about that more if you would like.
In the local city job centers, I'm assuming that's like our employment services where they provide different processes, like they provide job fairs and different things like that. Okay, so they're actually co-facilitators with us on this. So they've been working with us on this whole project as well. The Ontario Centre for Workforce Innovation did a really I'm really sad that they're gone, because their process on developing a project, you didn't just write a project proposal and just go, okay, and here's my partners. You actually had to develop, you had to have workshops together to develop the project proposal together as a community. So we had our Ontario Works teams there and all of our employment services team develop this project together. So it was a really good process that way. Yeah, they can team up with the education providers to capture their students doing that here. Absolutely. It was a really good process for us to work together, because too many times, if you work in isolation and you're in employment services, you don't think about the educational needs because people just want to get a job. You hear that, I just need a job. And then in education, it's hard for somebody there, once they get into education, they develop a close relationship, it's usually harder for them to move out into the workforce, into another program. But by doing this together, it has created a really nice cross-section. All of our individuals were taking programs within both employment services and adult upgrading, which was just great. It was that they could see the differences in what was provided. And the supports are like, we can't know everything that's out there. So employment services knows everything about employment, and we know about adult education. So mixing us together was the best thing we could have done in this region.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for your time and talent and the way you're creating change in your community. We will send out this recording next week to all of you and include the links to the studies that Jane will provide. Again, if you like this kind of content, please consider coming to Addressing the Challenges of Poverty Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana, September 22nd to the 24th, where we have other practitioners sharing really good best practices from their community. So we would love to have your full participation in that. So we will be here again on the first Thursday of June with another webinar, and we look forward to having you join us then. But thank you again, Jane, for all your wonderful content strategies and best practices. Thank you.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you, folks.